Alright, my name is Sean Fallon, and you're listening to episode 40, One Season Wonders. Welcome to From First to Last.
No one told you.
Baby, I hear the blues are calling, toss.
Hello again, and welcome again. My name is Sean Fallon, this is From First to Last. Today's episode is episode 40, and it is a special episode for two reasons. The first reason is this will be the last episode of From First to Last that we do for a while. Probably not forever, but we'll see. But I wanted to sort of wind it back and have take a bit of a break and just see, what the future held. A lot of other things going on at the moment, so we'll just see how it goes. The other reason it's a special episode is because every 10th episode is a special episode. But rather than doing a movie episode, we've decided to do something a little bit different. So today I am joined by my, I think, longest recurring guest, who's been on the most times, and ironically is also, or not ironically, but was also my first guest and might also be my last guest. So I'd like to give a big greeting to Diego Crespo. Diego, how are you?
Hello, I'm very happy to be back. Thank you for having me on for this momentous occasion.
Of course. Well, it just sort of fell in an interesting way, and then I was like, well, that makes sense. Diego can be first and possibly last, but not necessarily last. So for this special episode, rather than doing a movie special, we've decided to look at TV shows that didn't really get a last. So they're one season wonders. They only ran for, well, I just checked, each one of these only ran for 13 episodes and never really got to finish, and were always shows that were really good. So we've chosen three shows for today. The first one is Terriers. So Terriers ran for 13 episodes in 2010. It starred, how do you pronounce this guy's name? Donald?
I think it's Donald Logue.
Donald Logue. It starred Donald Logue and was created by Ted Griffin. Now, Diego, what is your experience with Terriers?
I saw trailers. I was really into Sons of Anarchy on FX at the time, and I saw a bunch of trailers for this dog show, and I was like, okay, whatever. I don't understand.
Okay.
The marketing was terrible for the show. And then I caught a little bit of an episode, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then every year I like to do something called a blind buy. I just blind buy, a movie or show that was recommended to me.
Oh, cool. That's a good idea.
Yeah, and then I did that for Terriers, and I was just like, oh my god, why didn't this catch on? Yeah. And then I remembered the trailers, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. It's a weird one. It's one of those ones that quite a similar thing. Like, it had already been cancelled and finished, and I was just looking for a TV show, and it was one of those ones that just kept appearing. I hadn't, because obviously I not being in America, I wouldn't have regularly watched FX, so I didn't see any trailers or any marketing for it, and I don't know how well it translated from America to the rest of the world. But I was friends with Americans, and they were like, "Oh shit, have you seen?" You know what? Actually, you know where it might have come from? I think I'd seen. I think Gotham was about to be released, and I didn't 100% know who Donald Logue was. And someone was like, "No, don't watch Gotham. Watch Terriers." So I sat down, I started watching it, and then I got distracted by something else, and then I keep coming back to it every so often, and it's great. It's sort of a weird version of a Humphrey Bogart movie that's in the modern day and set on the beach. It's very much I like the fact that if you are sort of a hard living private detective, you don't get to have your own office. You just work in a truck. You know what I mean? It's in the real world, you can't pay rent based on taking pictures of adulterous husbands and stuff like that. This was really cool. It was just, again, it's just one of those weird shows that was massively critically acclaimed. It is held in high regard. A lot of if you Google great shows that only ran for one season, this is every time this is always on the list. Why do you think it didn't take off?
I think really it did come down to the marketing, but I also think it might have been too ahead of its time, but just by 2 or 3 years, because we're seeing a lot of these quirkier, low-key drama shows that, while maybe not oppressively dark or hyper stressful, they're you're seeing a lot of shows on Netflix trying new things, right? And I feel like this is the perfect Netflix show.
Oh, definitely.
Because it deals with like serious character drama stuff, but it's also pretty laid back for the most part. There's obviously like an overarching plot. It's very Chinatown, but like a sun-bleached version of Chinatown.
Yes, I have that in my notes.
Yeah, oh my god, it's great. And then like the dialogue is it's not witty, but it's like there's an authentic banter to the two main detectives, Hank and Britt. It's so, it's not bizarre, but it's a little weirder than I think traditional cable dramas were at the time, because that's when Breaking Bad and Sons of Anarchy and all these really heavy stuff was going on, and so it's like, oh, this is a little too light, it's too fluffy, and it's really not when you start realizing what's happening in the series. And so I just think it was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're spot on there, because like, yeah, it's too light to be like for the Breaking Bad crowd, but it's too heavy to be for the, well, I don't know, what would the other, like for the NCIS crowd. You know, so it's sort of like that sweet spot in the middle where, because like you say, the dialogue is great, and it does have that sort of, it's not quite, because the first time I watched it, I kept thinking about Ryan Johnson's Brick, you know, where it's like set in the modern day, and everyone talks in that very affected noir movie way. But this sort of takes that and then just like turns it a little bit. So you have lines like, I think the ex-wife says to him at the start, "You look like shit," and he's like, "Yeah, my Pilates instructor died." And I always thought that was just a great line of dialogue, and one that sort of like, it's not quite something that you would have like Humphrey Bogart say, but it's like a, you know, it's like you've taken that line and just sort of twisted it a little bit, so it's not as perfectly witty, but it's still very, very good, and it's great. I mean, I think the problem is with a show like this is you can't necessarily say, oh, it's like, you know, it is like Chinatown, but it's not like something else that's on TV. Because even with Breaking Bad was like, oh yeah, no, oh, if you like Sopranos, you'll like Breaking Bad. Whereas this, I can't really think of anything in the same vein. So it's hard to sell it to people because you can't base it on something that already exists, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. There's no reason why this shouldn't be like a genre-defining show on television, but I think that's also a big thing. There's no, like, I think it's the Max Landis guy who pitches a lot of movies with like, oh yeah, it's like this meets this, and so people feel comfortable buying a lot of his stuff because it's like, oh, that's familiar but different.
Yeah.
And regardless of opinions on his work, as we all have them, it works. And Terriers, I can't even imagine how this was pitched. Like, it's not that weird of a show. No. It's not like bizarre and outlandish or obtuse. It's just different in how it's approached. And it's funny that you bring up Ryan Johnson because he actually directs an episode.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, it's episode 5, Manifest Destiny, and it's great. So check it out.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and this was also it was a team up of Ted Griffin and Sean Ryan. Sean Ryan's the guy from The Shield. Ted Griffin's the writer of Ocean's 11. And so I guess when you mix those together, you get Terriers. Maybe that's how people should pitch the show. It's like, oh yes, Ocean's 11 meets The Shield, even though that's maybe not quite right either.
But I will say, a movie or TV show that was Ocean's 11 meet The Shield, I'd be all over that.
Oh yeah.
Like a bunch of corrupt cops and they've got to like do a wacky heist. Shit, that'd be amazing. Right, ignore the podcast. That's what that's what we're pitching now. That's what we're doing. But yeah, no, this it's interesting because you can't. Yeah, I'm sort of stuck on that idea now, really, where you're sort of like, how would you pitch it? Because it's not like Psych or something like that, where you've got like two dudes sort of bantering and like that's how they're solving crimes. It's. I think it's a thing of like that's a bit of a problem, I guess, with viewers and like consuming TV. You do like to be presented something that is wholly familiar, even if it has a little bit of a difference. And I think that is something that we're going to talk about quite a lot today with these three shows, as being like shows that are just pretty much unique. And because they're unique, they're so hard to sell. And then because they can't sell, they can't. And each one of them, like, if you just happen to stumble upon it, people really enjoy it. Like Terriers, I'm on Wikipedia now, and you go to like the critical response bit, which I've completely lost. Yeah, the reception bit. Everyone's saying it was one of the best shows of the year. Yeah, AV Club ranked it as number 7 of the best shows of 2010. IGN loved it. It's one of those shows that's like, it's so frustrating, it's like when you have like, well, Gotham being the example. Gotham's it's running now for 4 seasons, and that show, like the first season of that show, I watched half of it and I was like, nah, this just doesn't do it for me. I like the cast, I like the bits of the idea, but the execution is nonsense. But every time I see a trailer for that show, I am like, how do they keep doing this? Like, they've got so many mad concepts in that show, and it's like supposed to be like this grounded cop show, but it's like Mad Hatter's in it, the Court of Owls, Solomon Grundy, and they've really just gone completely nuts. And that show continues to go from strength to strength, where you're like, yeah, but it's not that good. It's not good enough. Whereas this, something like wholly unique and interesting, and you just get like, because it got cancelled. Oh yeah, so it got cancelled after the first season had finished. And I did hear that the first season does end on a cliffhanger as well, or the only season.
It kind of does. Thematically, it's done. Plot, it's like you can see what the thread would have been, kind of, in a way, but it's character stuff, not really plot stuff. Just like, if you understand who these people are by the end of the first season, you know how that cliffhanger will immediately be resolved. And that's all I'll say on it. But it's really a nice little standalone story that unfortunately didn't have to be a standalone story. And honestly, it's so good, and I would have loved to have seen season after season of this show and these characters. I don't know what you would do. Not in the sense like, how do you top that? Because I think that's a weird way to approach storytelling in general. But where do you go after that? Like, I feel like it would need to be a completely different show almost, in a good way. Some shows can pull that off, but I would have been super interested in seeing where it would take off. But I have tremendous love in my heart for this series, regardless.
Yeah, no, it is great, and I do sort of like, I had a bit of a thing when I was watching it of like trying to see where people went on to after this to make sure that everyone got to be successful and continue doing things. So Ted Griffin, he ended up, like you say, I mean, he was already pretty successful after Ocean's 11 and all that. So he went on and he wrote Wolf of Wall Street, a bunch of other stuff. Yeah, he's fine. he's still getting work. Yeah. And obviously, Donald Logue is continuing to be Harvey Bullock on Gotham, so he's doing well. And, well, actually, one of the actresses in this, Laura Allen, we will come back to her about one of the things she did next.
Yes.
It's just to sort of just wrap up Terriers before we move on to the next show. Would you say, if people listening to this and they've never watched Terriers, is the first season by itself, like, obviously the only season by itself, is it worth the watch?
Yes.
And then...
Sorry.
Yeah, no. And then, like, because, when you have some first seasons where you're like... or only season, you're like, yeah, it was good in the moment, but I wouldn't really go back because I know how frustrating it is. I can't think of a show. I should have thought of a show off the top of my head. Of like, you know what, I can't even think of one. Ignore that question. Let's just say yes.
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 I will continue recommending this show to people. It's going to leave Netflix like immediately after we're done recording, so I can't really say people check it out there, but it's on iTunes. I think that's the only way to get it now. For whatever reason, it was a big hit in Canada when it aired a year later. Like, it caught an audience there, but they're like, yeah, but we already canceled it where it's produced, so we can't do anything about that. And
amazing.
That's a huge bummer, but please watch Terriers, because it's one of the best shows ever, and it's better to burn out than fade away, I guess,
There you go. I think, yeah. And I mean, it is that thing as well. It never got the chance to sort of diminish in quality and go shitty. I guess that's the thing.
Yeah. Oh, like, last thing, because I remember specifically recommending this to a friend, and the first thing that came to my mind was that if this had been on as long as Breaking Bad, I think it would have caught on to the same audience. Because Breaking Bad is not that dark at the beginning. It's kind of goofy. Yeah. Dark stuff happens. It's intense. But the audience didn't really catch on until season 3, like where the big cliffhanger started happening.
Yeah, when you get to a point like definitely with Breaking Bad, and me and my family sort of got into this, where you have to draw a line and say, are you with Walt or are you with Jesse? And I think when you get to that point of the show, it's hit a certain point of darkness for the viewer, because I was with Walt and my wife was with Jesse, and she was like, you're out of your fucking mind. He is that. She was like every episode. She was like, no, all I want is Walt to get caught or to get killed. Like, what are you talking about? He's the main character in the show. And I'm like justifying everything that Walt does, and I'm like, yeah, no, he's got to let Jane die because otherwise she's going to turn him in, and so on. And once it's made you like an accomplice to evil, yeah, that's it then. Like that level of darkness. And that's the thing, like that sort of character, like Hank Dolworth in Terriers, is one of those characters who you can imagine becoming not an antagonist so much, but like one of those characters like Vic Mackey in The Shield, where you get to a certain point where you're like, I really should dislike this character, but I also sort of want to see him, get his way through. Well, I mean, The Shield, have you watched all of The Shield?
I have. Very good show.
Yeah, because you go through a bit of a different weird phases with Vic Mackey, where you're like, I want to see him caught, then I want to see him get away, and then gradually you go up and down, up and down, up and down, until the show just... it would be worth continuing doing this podcast just to do The Shield every week for a year. Just different people coming in to talk about that final episode, because that final season is top-tier television. Like, Walton Goggins just starts killing it in that scene. Anyway... I'm getting distracted. Back to Terriers. Terriers. Definitely, I would say everyone should check that out. And, I don't know, maybe Netflix will bring it back or something.
Oh, I wanted to. They talked about a TV movie for a while, but that fell through. So, heartbreaking stuff.
We are in a bit of an interesting period where these kinds of things can happen. Obviously before we were recording, we were talking about when we're going to go watch the eighth Star Wars film, and earlier this year we watched a new Blade Runner. Things do happen. Like it is we're in that version of the world where things might happen. So who knows? They still keep saying there's going to be the TV movie of Deadwood. Like they've literally said that could happen next year, which they've said every year since the show got cancelled. But who knows? Okay, moving on. So the next show you chose was... Now, this was a very interesting one for me, because I had not really any inkling of this show. Like, I didn't really know it existed. And it's a show called Kings, which ran for 13 episodes in 2009. Now, it was created by Michael Green, stars Ian McShane, and... a baby Sebastian Stan, and is, according to Wikipedia, the series' narrative is loosely based on the biblical story of King David, but set in a kingdom that is culturally and technologically resembles the present-day United States. Now, you'd said to me you should watch Kings. I went and read that little tagline, and I was like, oh my god, get this into my eyes now. Ian McShane, Sebastian Stan, that premise, but then Michael Green is co-creator of American Gods, and he also wrote Logan, and he wrote Blade Runner 2049, and I assume he had something to do with Hannibal. Did he? No.
No, but he's buddies with Brian Fuller with American Gods, so I think that's where the connection comes in.
I was like, I need to watch this. So the first episode of the pilot episode of Kings is a double episode, and it's an hour and a half long, and I will just say up front, I loved it. It was so good. What was your experience with this show?
Casually watching television, deep in my Heroes days. Heroes was still on the air, and I was like, "Oh, when's that? How's that gonna work?" Because the quality was like just all over the place by this point in Heroes.
Yeah,
mostly bad. And then I just caught the premiere of this show called Kings one day, and was like, "What is this? What is happening here?" And I was really getting into the more, like, I guess, quote unquote prestige stuff on HBO, like Carnival, all the weird stuff that you wouldn't have seen on public television at the time. And so this like scratched that next particular itch for me. I was like, oh wow, this is bizarre. Terriers isn't bizarre. This is bizarre in a good way.
Yeah, I mean, this was like when we're saying about Terriers being something unique and all that. This was, like, I had no idea what to expect when I started watching it, and when I was watching the episode, I was just thinking to myself, how the shit does this exist? Like, how did they pitch this? How did they... Because I instantly, like, when I got to the end of it, I was like, yeah, that's great, but I can totally see why it didn't catch on. because it's too weird. I think it's just that little bit, which I love. Like I love something that's very weird. But I can imagine just like people sat at home wanting to watch something. It's got that the soap opera trappings to bring people in, but the basic concept is just so weird that people, I don't know, I imagine it would be a very, very hard sell. Like, I sort of, when I read the plotline, I was like, yeah, I could imagine this being like a graphic novel. I could imagine that plotline working in that, where you've got like time to build a world and all that. But sort of like weekly television, I can imagine it being a bit of a hard sell for people. But it was great. It was really, like, really good. Like, I would just say the main dude, Christopher Egan, who plays David, like he's an Australian actor, quite bland. But at the same time, you've got Ian McShane, who is, oh my god, Ian McShane's amazing. Like, obviously enough that Michael Green was like, okay, I'll make him a king, and then that didn't work out, so now we'll make him a god, an American god. Like, I don't know where McShane goes from there. Like, he just continues to go up the food chain.
This is it's so weird, and they had the graphic novel comparison so on point, and I kind of wish that it had continued as that. It's like just stylistically too, like that could be really cool to see pop up on the page. And
it's great.
It's so weird. And I think this is something that's going to tie in all the shows that we talk about today, that they all are ahead of their time in a way. Like, I don't know if they would have caught on in a huge way, but I think they would have been able to sustain themselves longer. Because, American Gods wouldn't have existed 10 years ago. Hannibal would never have been on NBC before Kings. And I think this is also a credit to NBC, because they have two of the weirdest shows I've ever seen. And we're talking about them right now, and we're going to talk about one a little later.
That's it. No, it's
weird.
Yeah, you can imagine this being like now coming out, and it getting that weird audience. People like us would watch it, and then they'd be on Twitter talking about it, and it would spread and that kind of thing. Because like you say, Hannibal, there's so many times when I was watching Hannibal where I was just like, how the hell are they getting away with this? Like, the level of violence, the level of art, the level of, like, whole episodes, which would just, a lot of the episode would just be, like, a slow-motion image of a tap dripping, with just, like, discordant music playing in the background, and then a scene of very intense violence. Like, wow, this is very odd. But yeah, and American Gods is the same. Like, I tried to watch American Gods on the plane when I was flying back from somewhere recently, and I was like, oh, I'll watch an episode of American Gods. And, like, the first scene was just, like, a massive orgy in a temple somewhere. Like, ooh, better not watch this on a plane. And then in the end, like, it was the Queen of Sheba, so someone ended up having sex with her and then got sucked up inside her. Like, okay, yep, that's something that I've now seen. And yeah, so, I mean, I think the level of weirdness we're willing to get into our TV is definitely... It's getting better. It's getting much better. Yeah. And yeah, this was great. Like, I instantly, from this first hour and a half, I was like, yeah, there's so much plot going on here, and I feel like each character sort of had enough where I was like, yeah, I could follow any of these characters wherever they're going to go. There's a lot of meat here. And yeah, so in terms of like this obviously ran for 13 episodes. It looks like it was airing, then got moved again, and then just sort of like couldn't find an audience, and then just burnt out. So you watched it in real time, or did you catch it?
I watched it in real time. I went out of my way to keep track of it, because this is just unlike anything else. It's Bible fan fiction essentially.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It was. Yeah, no, it's. I know I just keep saying the same thing, like that it's weird, but it is. Again, like a hard sell, because you're like, it's like Dallas. It's like the soap opera Dallas meets the Bible. It's like, okay, yep, that's a tough sell. But yeah, no, I thought it was cool, and it was good to see like baby Sebastian Stan. He was little baby face, and and yeah, like Ian McShane just like is so good at that sort of very grandfatherly, yeah, you can trust me, but then is also just an utter shit. Like, he's very good at that in American Gods as well, where you're like, yeah, this guy, I just don't trust him. He's just up to something. But at the same time, I'm like, but I'd follow him just to see where he's going, knowing that eventually he will stab me in the back. But I want to see where this goes, you know.
Also, there are some surprisingly crazy character actor appearances too. Like, I don't want to give them all away, but Brian Cox shows up.
Love Brian Cox.
Michael Stahl David. Also, Macaulay Culkin appears.
Okay, that I'm into.
Yeah, and this show just goes for it. And if I'm being honest, I don't know if it all works throughout its entirety. But the beginning and the ending are for sure like showstoppers. And if you want to see just the level of like commitment NBC had to their shows, like say what you want about NBC programming and how they don't market them correctly, they commit to at least making them because oh my god.
Yeah, because I did think that in the first episode. Sorry, I was like, shit, this has cost money. Like there are things happening. Like the special effects were good. The war scenes didn't feel like they were too. Like I could see obviously they were war. It was like TV war, but at the same time, I was like, no, this feels I'm in it, you know, and that's good. Like and the inauguration or the crowning scene at the very start with like the massive tower and all that. I was like, yeah, this is cool. This is big. Like, it felt like a big show. And it did have a bit of a weird thing as well. It didn't feel like Terriers felt like that pilot could just be like a TV, like a short film by itself. Like, it felt like a little open and closed, little short film about a down-on-his-luck detective and sort of leaves you open for interpretation. But this was very much like, nah, this is chapter 1 of some huge story that we're going to take you down the road on. And it was good. It hooked me in. I was ready to just keep going.
Yeah, like honestly, this I feel like would be a good HBO show nowadays if they ever remade it or whatever.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, I mean, I think that is the thing. It's so frustrating when you do have like a show that just can't find an audience and dies, and then a few years later, like another show or a trend will come along, and you're like, shit. If that show had just come along that little bit later, and this is definitely, like you say, it would have been a really good HBO show if they could have really gone for it. Because it would have been, they could have brought it out now and been like, it's like Game of Thrones, but today, you know? and people ate that up. If it was on when Game of Thrones wasn't on TV and had all that sort of like weird palace intrigue and all that, people would have been all over that.
Yeah, like, there's no reason for them not to remake it now when you put it that way. Like,
yeah, and royalty is in. Like I've just started watching The Crown on Netflix, which is huge, and it's just like the life story of Queen Elizabeth, and it was amazing. And obviously, like there's a royal wedding in the mix. Everyone's sort of disgruntled with elected officials, so why not? And yeah, no, it was cool. I thought it was easy to follow, and it was cool, and it had like because I think that's the thing with shows like this. When you have to present them to people and you're like, oh, it's like the biblical story of King David, but set in the modern day, you're going to turn people off because they're going to be like, oh, is it all preachy and religious? And other people who just don't want to put in the work to understand it. Like, I'm always amazed by how popular Game of Thrones is, because it requires quite a bit of work. Well, at the start it did anyway. It's like, it involves quite a bit of work to keep up. Like, they don't really, they started holding up, a couple of years ago, they started really holding everyone's hand. But the first couple of years, it didn't. And you were sort of like, wait, who the fuck is this guy? And how does he relate to this guy? And you had to just know it. You had to remember it from, 10 episodes previous. And I think I'm always impressed that people have put in that amount of work. Because in the past, they wouldn't. Something like this, obviously, they're just like, nah, that feels too complicated. I don't understand these archetypes. I don't understand how there'd be a king in America. What's Gilboa? What's, Shiloh and all this. And it's a shame, because it's like, no, it's work for reward. Like, you put a little bit of work in to understand it, and you get rewarded. Whereas, obviously, you watch Big Bang Theory, and it's no work, and no reward, really. But
and just kind of insulting.
Yeah, but it's like colours and sounds in front of your eyes to keep you, to keep you entertained for 30 minutes while you, I don't know, before you make dinner. I don't know. That's my rant about the state of modern TV. But I think, just last thing about that, I think there's quite a lot of weird TV that's on now, and actually interesting the way you're saying about NBC. The Good Place, I think, is another NBC one, which is an incredibly weird show that has just been renewed for a third season. And that is a show that I feel like if The Good Place had come out 4 or 5 years ago, we'd be talking about it now. And we'd be saying like, oh my god, that show was so good, but there was only one season, because it's too high concept. Like, it's one of those really high concept shows where you're like, nah, people are going to turn off this in droves. But people went for it. So maybe now, if you're making TV, make weird TV, because people are into it. You know, people are gonna make the work, take the time and make the effort.
Yeah, it really is.
However, the shows we're talking about are just too weird to succeed. Which brings us to the final show, and possibly and one of the best pilots ever made, in my opinion. And that show is Awake, which ran in 2012. It stars Jason Isaacs and Laura Allen, who is Britt's girlfriend from Terriers, and Dylan Minnette, who plays Jason Isaacs' son, but he also played Jack's son on Lost, and on Lost his name was David Shepard, which is the same name as the main character in Kings. Yeah?
Bringing it all around.
Bringing it all around. Done. So it's all connected. Now, Awake is one of those shows where, marketing-wise, I think they put the trailer for this online like months and months and months before the show came out, and I caught it, and I must have watched that trailer 11,000 times. Because it was just like, it just laid out the concept of the show and gave you enough to sort of work with, and it just blew my mind. So I probably should outline what the concept of the show is. So basically, Jason Isaacs plays a detective who, at the start of the show, has a car crash, and he ends up sort of splitting into two realities. So when he goes... So in one reality, his wife died, and he lives with his son. But when he goes to bed at night and he wakes up, the wife is alive and the son is dead. And every night, when he goes to bed, it jumps between the two. And as the show goes along, we discover that we're not sure which one is the real one, but everything intersects. So the cases that he's trying to solve are... Oh god, this show is weird. Like, this was one that's a weird one. But this first episode is... I can't think off the top of my head of a pilot that got me more hooked into a show. Like, I was just like, fuck, I want to watch 12 more of these right now. How did you come around to Awake?
Yeah, I too saw the trailer for the pilot months before it came out, and I just thought, whoa, TV doesn't look like that. And it would eventually, when Hannibal and more Brian Fuller dramas come into play. Then also because of it's directed by David Slade, the pilot, who has a very distinct look for his television work. In a very good way. They all look like 30 Days of Night, which is not a complaint for me. And it just looks so crisp and interesting and really high concept. And that's when TV started making like a paradigm shift into the more weird. Game of Thrones was really picking up by that point. I think it was season 2. The first season had just came out when that happened, and then
this is in that period. Yeah, this is when it's like, I was living in Australia, and I remember like watching Game of Thrones, and my wife being like, she watched like 15 minutes of an episode, and she was like, nope, no thank you, not into this. Eventually would come around and is now hooked on it, but she was like, I don't get it, I don't like it, I don't want it. And just left the room. But other people were like, oh my god, this is game changing. Yeah, sorry. To interrupt.
No. It's important for historical context, because this is when people, I think, started craving the different stuff, and I think that's why Game of Thrones also took off too. Breaking Bad was going to end in a year, and this just it also didn't catch on. But everyone who saw it was like, holy shit, that pilot episode. It is literally mind blowing.
Yeah, I mean, when I was watching it, as soon as I saw that it was directed by David Slade, I was like, oh yeah, that explains a lot. That because he obviously his work on Hannibal and American Gods is like it like you say, it's like nothing else. Like there are great TV directors and all that, but David Slade, I feel like, is one of the only TV directors who just has like such a signature style that you can come in and be like, yeah, it's Slade. It's a Slade original. And like as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh yeah. And obviously Jason Isaacs, love Jason Isaacs. Like most of the stuff he's done, or everything he's done, I don't know, he's incredible. And yeah, just like yeah, just the way they it's such a hard. It's a concept, obviously, that this entire episode basically is set to explain. Like, by the end of this, no, the end of the 50 minutes, it's like, this is what we're doing, this is how it works, these are the rules, and so on and so on. But it doesn't feel as though that's all it is. You know, it doesn't feel as though it's just someone saying to you, right, sit down, I'm going to tell you what my show's about, and then we're going to start doing some plot. I feel like, you know, extra 40 minutes, I'd watch this as a movie. You know, I think this could legitimately be a really, really good movie.
Oh, I totally agree. And I actually think there are some, not pitfalls narratively, but I don't know if this could have sustained multiple seasons. The beginning and the end, much like Kings, are amazing. And just so fascinating, and pushing these questions about, like, are his emotions more important than reality? You know, can he even deal with reality by this point? Which one is reality? Are none of them reality? Is he the one in the dream? Like, it's all these super interesting questions. And then other times it'll just be like, oh, let's case of the week type stuff, and he's dealing with family problems. I mean, he's still dealing with them in two separate realities, but it's very natural television, I guess.
That was a bit of a turn off for me when I watched like the episodes I watched, because it was that thing of like, oh my god, this is gonna be awesome, it's gonna be this, it's gonna be this. And then there was just a few episodes where it would just be like, he was like just a crime show that was just like two crime shows at the same time.
Yeah.
And like, oh, okay, yeah, I felt like it was going to go more one way than the other way, but yeah, I mean, it is, yeah, I mean, it's a hard one to balance, but I think the thing is, again, it's a show that maybe, again, I know we're going to keep going back to this but like, if it was made now, I feel like there'd be less of an instinct to make it a crime of the week show. I feel like there would be more of a thing of like, no, people like serialized stuff. This concept actually lends itself more to being a bit more existential and a bit more weird. But we can, like, drop a case. Because even, like, Hannibal was, at times, a case of the week show. Like, there would just be episodes that would just... Well, there was a lot of episodes that were just about solving one murder in that 45 minutes. And Hannibal would just be there, fucking shit up in the background. And then gradually, as the show evolved, it sort of dropped that out and became more heavily the Will Hannibal story. But, like, that's the thing with this. It's like, if they were making it now, I'd like to see them be able to say, like, you know what, we'll have a case every so often, but the reason people are watching this show is to see how this character is dealing with this mental break or nervous breakdown or magic or whatever it is, and that's what people are watching it for, not to see, you know, crimes get solved. But I mean, it is an interesting concept, like, in this first episode, to see the idea of, you know, the crimes solving each other, so to speak. Like, it's like, oh, well, this is the numbers here, but the numbers match up here, and so on. And that's cool, but I couldn't watch that every week. You know, you get a couple of them, but you can't do that week in, week out.
Yeah, and to the show's credit as well, that also pushes the questions of his mental stability, too, because it's like, okay, well, if one's not real, but they're both helping me solve both cases, what does that mean? Like, you know, that makes him question stuff too, and I think that's super fascinating, but
yeah,
it doesn't always work that way. And so when it doesn't, it's head scratching and kind of like, all right, let's go back to the part where you're trying to find out whether you're existing. You know?
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, I could, again, like Kings, I could sort of, by the time I got to the end of this show, I was like, yeah, I can totally see how this got cancelled. Like, you can see, like, again, a critical success, very much praised and all that, but people would have just been like, nah, it's too much of a head scratcher. It's asking questions that I'm not comfortable with, you know. I don't need to question my reality.
Yeah, and when it pushes that envelope, it's challenging. It's exciting. You really get your time's worth with this one, and also across the board, these three shows that we talked about today, they all look freaking great. Maybe not like quote unquote movies, but they're well made enough that they feel cinematic. You know, like to the look, the editing, the way it's framed. I feel that they kind of almost transcend the traditional TV approach, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I also love The Good Place, but that's very much shot like a TV show.
Oh, 100%, yeah. That's definitely TV. Like, yeah, it was really refreshing to kind of sit and watch these three shows. Because, like you say, they were... Even Terriers felt, not epic, but it felt big. You know, it felt like a big production. It felt like something that I'd watch on the cinema. And then obviously Kings is like a massive epic, and then this is just... And then Awake is just gorgeous. Yeah, it is... TV is weird in that sense of, like, you know, having something like this, which is absolutely gorgeous to look at, and then just having, like, a little bit of it and not having the full story. Like, it is weird. You don't have that in many other things. So you don't have, like, halfway through a book, someone just takes the book off you and says, nope, no more book for you. Like, you'll have to just pretend you know how it ends. But yeah, no, I mean, these were all three fantastic choices for... one season wonders. Like, I did have a bit of a Google of like other options, and the usual ones popped up, like Firefly and stuff like that. I think they're all very much like, as we've talked about, they're very much of the same vein of like, these are shows that were just too weird to work. Like, they were either out of time, like, because I see Terriers now. Have you ever seen on Netflix Flaked, like the Will Arnett one?
I have not.
My Fiona watched it. My wife, obviously. I'm clarifying that she is my wife to the listeners, not to you. You have met her. Yeah. So that would, like, Fiona, my wife.
We all just hung out.
Yeah, we went out drinking. So that show is like Will Arnett's. I feel like he must have like a. I'm not sure how it works, but I assume that people, like, when you do a Netflix show, you sign a deal with Netflix and you can kind of come back and do other shows. Because it tends to be like in terms like BoJack Horseman, obviously, BoJack and Alison Brie have both come back and done Netflix shows. So Will Arnett made BoJack, and then Flaked is sort of like, it's set on Venice Beach, and it's him as... I can't think what his job is, but he's like a former alcoholic. He's basically playing himself. He's like a former alcoholic who was married to a TV star. But then, at the same time, it's all this weird shit. And he's a bit of a horrible character. But it looks loads like Terriers. Because it's all set on the beach, and it's all, like, intense, quite dark, and then quite funny at the same time. And it's those sorts of characters as well. Like, they're all a little bit, like, grungy, but everyone's funny and cool, but they're all a little bit, you know, a little bit stupid or a little bit grungy and all that. And when I kind of saw a trailer for that, and I was like, oh yeah, that's just Terriers, but without the detective element. You know, it's like, oh, that's weird. And yeah, something where, like, obviously these kinds of shows where you have, like, a main character who most of the time, or even all the time, is, you know, a white dude of a certain age who sort of can't make it work and then ends up kind of, like, going against the law or breaking the rules and all that. It's obviously a huge genre now. Like, that is pretty much... I think every actor's come back and had a crack at doing one of them. So I mean, it'd be interesting... It would have been interesting to see that show now. And then you say with Kings. Like, Kings now would have been... Oh, you're missing Game of Thrones? Here's... Because I think no one's really... There's a few kind of Game of Thrones-ish shows, like Vikings and stuff like that. But if someone could, like, make a modern version of Game of Thrones, but kept all the kind of... Well, kings. If it was like, okay, these are kings, but it's like business kings, people would be all over that. You know, because they're like, oh, cool. Well, I miss Game of Thrones. I need a hit. Ian McShane. Let's do it. And then obviously, yeah, Awake. Awake is one of those shows that I feel like if they just retooled it slightly and also made it a movie. Fuck it. Just make it a film. Just make it an hour-and-a-half film. Keep David Slade, bring back the original cast, because Dylan Minnette, like the son, he's gone on to do. He was in that 13 Reasons Why. Like, he's doing well for himself and so on. So yeah, Jason Isaacs kicks ass. So bring them all back. That's my final words on it. My final ramblings.
I actually totally agree with that. Like, yeah, don't bring Awake back as a TV show. Do it as a movie next time.
And I think it would work really well as a movie because yeah, it's got. Like you were saying, really, it's got enough of a concept to hook you in, but not necessarily a concept to keep you in. Like, it sort of begins to fray around the edges when you have to sort of decide, is it a cop show? Is it a fantasy show? Is it both? How is it both? And so on and so on. Be like, no, in like a 2-hour movie, like 90-minute, 2-hour movie, you could get a lot of that mad shit in there and then wrap it up and kind of leave it on a cliffhanger or leave it on an ambiguous ending. And yeah, people would eat that shit up. So, because this is a special episode and we haven't kind of done our usual thing from first to last and all that, I thought we'd end with, what TV are you watching now that you think people should be watching to make sure that it doesn't get cancelled?
The Good Place. Everything else I watch is on the CW because I got tired of like the very broad prestige drama stuff like on HBO and AMC. Like it all feels very similar to me. But for whatever reason, the CW shows have stuff like The 100. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
I am.
Okay.
I haven't watched it, but I am.
All right. That is like YA transforms into Game of Thrones. Like it's very CW at first, and then the second season does Game of Thrones better than like the season of Game of Thrones that was on at that time, and I was astonished.
Okay.
Yeah, The Good Place and like The 100 are like the only ones I'd really recommend right now. But I'm not watching that much at the moment. But those are really great shows, and they deserve your attention.
Yeah, no, that's Good Place. Of these two, I've seen The Good Place. I think The Good Place is incredible. I am amazed at how successful it's been and how successful it continues to be, based on the fact that it is, as I wrote for audiences everywhere, possibly the most horrific show on TV. Like I wrote a thing for Halloween about how The Good Place might be the only true horror show on TV, because it just presents you with this idea of eternal torture, and like presents it as comedy. You're like, oh my god, these people are going to get tortured forever? Oh no! Like no, think about that. give it an extra couple of seconds of thought. It's the worst thing imaginable. But yeah, I absolutely love it. Like I say, I just started watching The Crown last night, and that was pretty good. Lots of good performances in that. I can't think of anything. Like, I'm still hooked on the old favorites: Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Jane the Virgin, BoJack.
Yeah, great shows. Oh, okay. It's not. It was almost canceled, but they're coming back for one final season, like a shortened 8-episode season. I would heartily recommend New Girl to people, and I never thought I would say that, but it is the most relatable show I've ever seen in my entire life. Whatever that says about me, I don't know, but that's the one.
Okay, New Girl. I have a bit. I don't think I have watched any of that, but Zooey Deschanel annoys me. Like, she is that whole sort of like. I don't think it's actually her that annoys me. It's like the twee sort of like little ukulele playing version of her that they sort of present to the world, and I'm like, I just feel like if I start watching that show, I would never want to watch anything else that she does. But I'll go by your recommendation, and I will give it a try.
Okay, because the important thing to remember is that she's the lead, but the supporting cast has just as much time as her, and how they all react to her is why that show works, and I think helps win people over on that persona of her. Because I've heard that complaint many times before, too. And then a lot of the people I recommended it to ended up liking it. So we'll see how that goes.
I will give that a go. Oh, and one more, actually. Mindhunter. If you want to talk about, like, cinematic TV, the Mindhunter's a good one. 4 of the 10 episodes are directed by David Fincher. So I think the first 2 and the last 2. And that was incredible. Like, it's a weird one with it being Netflix, because you have this thing of, like, the episode lengths vary, which I quite enjoy sometimes. So randomly, I think like episode 6 or 7 is only 30 minutes long, whereas all the others are like between 40 and an hour. So just randomly, you're just kind of in the middle, and you're sort of on a bit of a binge, but it's quite a dark show, so you don't really want to binge it too much. And then you're like, oh, the next episode's half an hour long? Oh, fuck that. Yeah, let's go for it. Let's do this thing. And then you just keep going after that. So that's a really good one. Other than that, Diego, where can people find you, and what are you up to at the moment?
You can find me at DEWGO Waffles on Twitter. Links to everything I write or produce podcast-wise over there. But right now, I am knee-deep in a retrospective for the entire Star Wars series leading up to The Last Jedi. That is consuming a lot of my life, and I'm actually very proud of it. We're still doing traditional Waffle Press episodes in between, but if you want to learn some fun and not so fun history behind the Star Wars series and George Lucas being both the best and worst person ever, you should check him out. because there's a lot of
Cool.
fun little tidbits.
Definitely. And also as well on the Waffle Press, if you want to listen to something about Star Wars, you can find a podcast that I did with you where I have a brief nervous breakdown about the Phantom Menace, I believe.
Yes.
So that's on there if you go looking.
Yes, you're on a couple episodes, actually.
Yeah, I'm there. I got around. But yeah, no, I think I will. I'll have to check out your Star Wars thing. Is it you and Matt Garingo?
Yes, it is me and Matt Garingo. I gotta get you onto the regular show too. We gotta work out the time difference.
Yeah, that's always the thing. But yeah, that's all good. Well, Diego, thank you for coming on the last show, possibly, and obviously for coming on the first show originally, and then 2 more shows in the middle of that. It was great to have you, and this was. This was a very interesting show for me to kind of sit and watch these 3 pilots and sort of like. I think you do need to do this sometimes just to remind yourself of where TV is and where TV was. You know, you can kind of like, I can look at TV now and be like, oh yeah, we're in a good position because weird shit's working. Like the stuff that I like is popular, which is good.
Yeah.
Whereas then the stuff I liked was getting cancelled. You know, so okay, I'm on an up at the moment. Let's see how long that lasts. Yeah, so thank you for that. They were great choices of shows.
Oh, thank you again for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Of course. I usually sign off with where people can find me if they want to have guest spots, but I'm not going to. So who knows? In 6 months, in a year, in 1 month, in 3 days, I may be back, but we shall see. But otherwise, again, thank you, Diego.
Thank you again for having me. I will. If this is the last one, I will miss this show very much.
Yeah, we shall see. Anyway, so my name is Sean Fallon. This has been From First to Last. Goodbye.
Saas meillä,